Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome to another week of our show. We're here on Monday, February 27th. We have show this Monday today, and we also have a show coming up on Friday, and then we will be off next week due to Loyola spring break. So we've got two fun shows coming your way this week, but let me introduce ourselves as always. I am your host today, Jeffrey Bazzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how is your Monday going so far? And how is your weekend?
Well, weekend was good. I was at the very exciting Hounds men's basketball win over the weekend at American. I saw you there as well, Jeffrey. It was a great game, overtime. Nice come from behind victory too. I thought the offense looked good in the second half. Some guys really stood out. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But just in general, I thought it was a good weekend. Nothing really too crazy on the sports calendar. Um, but hey, March is almost here, and we know what goes on in March when it comes to college basketball. So
Oh,
that's
yes,
going
we
to get
do.
exciting. Conference tournaments start this week.
Yes, they do. There's some this week. There's some that are starting next week, and all of them will conclude by Selection Sunday, which this year falls on March 12th. So, yeah, there's a lot of good action heating up in college basketball. Do you want to start there, though?
Yeah,
Because I
let's
feel like
let's let's start with the
we
Hounds.
got to start with the men's basketball team. They picked up a humongous victory on Saturday night. They took down the American Eagles right here at home in Reitz Arena. It was an overtime victory, and it wasn't easy. They were down for a good chunk of the game, not by too many points, but they always found themselves down, I think, 4 or 5, 6 points. But you know what? They found a way to force overtime. They ended up pulling away with a 83-77 overtime victory, which propelled them to the 8th seed in the Patriot League tournament. And as a reward, the Loyola men's basketball team will be hosting Holy Cross tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here at Reitz Arena. And Jimmy, what did you see from the end of the game specifically? Because I felt like there was just so many stretches in the first part of the game where you thought we would tie the game and maybe get back into it, but we just couldn't get something to go right. And then I felt like all of a sudden someone turned on a light switch and we were just making buckets, getting stops. Everything just seemed to go right at the right time.
Well, I think it would be can be attributed to two things. The second half kind of rally that we had. First is defense, because I thought we had some really nice steals in the beginning of the second half that kind of got us going. Some nice, easy transition buckets. That was kind of where it started. But you know what else? You know where else it started too? Deion Perry started to take over. Kenny Jones was hitting some nice shots. I feel like our offense was starting to flow a little bit better too. And you know what was nice to see? Alonzo Farre hitting those threes as a big man. That opened up our offense so much more. And that was kind of, I felt like the difference is like when Alonzo came to the game, he added a spark on offense and it just opened up some more shots. We saw Deion obviously cook a little bit in the second half. We saw Dave Brown make some really nice plays at the end. In overtime, he put a go ahead three. And then he also had the pass to Alonzo Farre, which led to the dunk for the tie. That was very good as well.
Yeah, I thought Alonzo, especially because he became kind of the primary big man down the stretch, just
Yeah,
because Golden DK fouled out.
fouled out, and truthfully, up to that point, we're getting absolutely murdered on the boards. Because I mean, at one point we were trailing by 20 in the rebound category.
Right. The one player that was really tough to stop on American was their center, Matt Rogers. He
And he
went for
filled us.
24 points and 16 rebounds. He did.
I said
And
that.
we had trouble finding answers to stop him. And it was kind of more of the same. He was just feasting inside. But yeah, I agree. I think Alonzo was definitely the spark plug that we needed. Not only did he stretch the floor, he made a couple of threes, but he was just very active in the post, passing out of the post, scoring in the post. I don't know. And it kind of led to other players kind of finding their way. I thought Deion had an excellent game. And shout out to Deion Perry. I'm not sure if you saw this, Jimmy, but he was named Patriot League Player of the Week and Patriot League Rookie of the Week. It's the
Very
first
deserving.
time ever in Patriot League men's basketball history that has happened.
Wow, that is actually
It's
insane.
kind of
That
unbelievable.
is unbelievable.
So shout out Deion Perry. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised if there's one guy who can do it and is certainly deserving of it. It's Deion. He's been playing absolutely phenomenal lately, despite his short size and being a very undersized for a basketball player who's Division One. He has all the heart in the world. He's so athletic, especially on the defensive end too. He is an absolute menace.
Especially for his size.
Yeah, he is so quick too. That's another thing. It's like when he's making the cuts, And when he wants to change direction on the court, like you want to talk about just quickness for a couple steps, he has it. Like he certainly has
Yeah, when
that.
he brings the ball up, he's not wasting any time. He's
No.
getting up there past half court and
Great.
making things. Yeah.
Because it speeds up our offense. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed is I feel like we play a little bit better when we're fast.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, especially on the offensive end. It's just like you don't want to take dumb shots, obviously, when you're playing fast, and sometimes that does happen. But naturally, playing a little bit faster, I feel like we have a pretty athletic team.
Yeah, especially with the Princeton offense too. You get the dribble handoffs going, you get movement. Yeah, good things can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Playing fast has been to our benefit, and it's certainly been showing recently. I definitely feel like it just looks a lot better when we're playing fast too.
Another guy too who was really hot early on, and he kind of continued it throughout the whole game, was Kenny Jones.
Yeah,
Kenny Jones was phenomenal, and I could tell early on he just had that look in his eyes. And I know it was senior day, so probably meant a little special for him. But he obviously was a senior last year, but he was a grad student this year. But
he had 21.
He had 21. I just felt like he was looking for his shot early, and it kind of continued throughout the whole game. He was getting around screens, getting open jumpers, hitting some threes. He just had it. And then another guy too, who I thought kind of found himself later in the game, was Jalen Andrews. He had some timely buckets. I remember the Hounds were down, I think, 4 points, and he scored all 4 in a row to tie game. Those were some timely buckets.
Start off great either. That was the thing. Like he didn't end up even hitting a 3, which is still very rare for Jalen. He's usually a very effective shooter. It's just that he couldn't get him to sink, but he found other ways to, help the team. And, with a player like that, who's in his 5th year and is a leader on the team, that's kind of what you expect. It's like when one thing's not really going right, he finds a way to make other things happen.
Right. And the common theme here with this game, we've mentioned all these players: Alonzo Fabre, Jalen Andrews, Kenny Jones, Deion Perry. A lot of them are openers and closers. We thought that Kenny was kind of the opener, kind of set the tone. Deion was kind of the constant denominator throughout the game. He was just very solid. Jalen kind of had his moments down the stretch, same with Alonzo. And then David Brown, of course, had those 5 huge points off the bench, including the go-ahead 3-pointer that put the Hounds up for good. So everyone all around just chipping in. It was a huge victory too, especially to get that home game tomorrow night.
And you know what it is too, when I was watching this game, I feel like there was a lot of circumstances going against us. I thought in the first half, I'm just going to be honest, I really thought the refs were horrible that game. Like, I thought those guys were terrible. I mean, the one guy calling the tech on our coach, what did he say? He didn't even say anything. Oh, my God. He said, oh, it's a bad call. And then the one guy wants to make a big deal about it. Come on. He didn't even raise his voice or anything. It's ridiculous. He made a bad call. And also, too, it was a very chippy game. Like, there was guys going down on both ends. We saw Golden get elbowed in the face at one point. And then we also saw a guy on their team end up getting hit by Golden. That was his 5th foul. That was ultimately the one that went out. And that was huge because that ended up being flagrant. So it was a very chippy game. I didn't think the refs were that great. But I thought that was kind of part of the reason we were in a hole in the first half, is because we were just getting absolutely screwed.
Yeah, there were a lot of calls that were bad early.
That tech was ridiculous. I mean, absolutely just black.
I thought that Hardy was, I don't know, expressing how he felt, but he wasn't doing it in an outrageous way. He was just upset.
No, they were just
talking to him in a nice demeanor manner.
50 calls, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the other coach was yelling just as much. I didn't even see the referees acknowledge him. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, it kind of felt a little like a double standard.
Yeah, college basketball refs are just always a train wreck. They want to make the whole game about themselves, per usual. But thank God we were able to overcome it in the end. And honestly, the second half, I mean, that was kind of the best I've seen our team play in a while. I really thought that was good. Like, if we can keep that going, I mean, that's really where we want to be. And correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we're kind of hitting our best step right now.
We are, and we've talked about this a lot recently, and you've brought up how we kind of do well when the offense puts up a lot of points, and 83 points is a lot of points. And I know we had OT as a bonus, but yeah, I felt like recently we're just kind of clicking more, especially offensively.
Yeah. No, absolutely offensively. That's definitely where I think the biggest switch has been. It's just been making shots. Like, they're just hitting more shots now. And it all starts Tuesday, right? Like, it's a new season. The way that we got to look at it is like, what happened before does not matter. The regular season does not matter until this point, because in March, anybody can beat anybody.
Right. And I think that's a huge point that you say that what happened before doesn't matter anymore, because we're playing Holy Cross, and we played them very recently. We played them last Wednesday right here at home, and it's going to be the same exact circumstance, except this time it's tomorrow night. And the different circumstance this time is that it's win or go home. It's not just a regular season game. It's do or die now. And the Hounds won 90-68. And I felt like once they jumped out to that lead, they really didn't look back. So I know that they're probably coming and thinking, oh, we know we can beat this team. We've done it before, and we've done it in a pretty good fashion. So I think you got to come in with the right mindset of, hey, and we know we've beat them before, but we can't take anything for granted. You got to do the little things right and then go from there.
Yeah, and we have won 4 of our last 5. Our only loss in the last 5 games was the Navy loss, and that was a game that we were in the second half. In fact, we were leading in, and then the game kind of just got away from
Yeah,
us.
kind of had a bad run go against us.
Bad run. There's some calls went the other way. Some shots didn't go in. They were making shots. It was a really tough stretch, and that ended up being the game because that kind of happened like, a little bit towards the middle of the second half, and I felt like we just never really recovered from that. But if you excuse that, all these other games have been games that we've kind of battled in and really overtook. Like a lot of these games are dogfights that we're finding a way to pull out.
Right. And we were mentioning how Perry, Andrews, Jones, and Fowey were kind of the key catalysts in the win on Saturday. They were also the key guys to get that Holy Cross win last Wednesday. Dion had 27, Jalen chipped in with 17, Kenny with 12, Alonzo with 11. So I guess you just got to ride those 4 guys. Those has got to be the guys that are probably putting up shots.
Certainly. And listen, those 3 guards, I would put them against anybody in the Patriot League. They can play with anybody, those 3. We definitely have a shot as long as those 3 are out there. And I'm alluding to Jalen, Kenny, Dion, Perry. The one thing I will say, though, is we got to improve in some areas because we had some things that are like non-negotiables in March that got to be better. Number one, the free throws are at least getting a little bit better. At least they're up to like 60% nowadays. But gosh, we got to shoot over 75%. We got to hit 3 of 4. We got to be doing that every time we're out there because it's free points. It's free points.
Yeah, you can't give them away.
Cannot give that away. The second thing, turnovers. That's been getting a lot better this year. We actually won the turnover battle against American. But the real reason that it was so close is because we got absolutely dominated on the boards. So I feel like those kind of areas, specifically on offense, like their offense kind of dominated on the boards, the big guys that they had. It was certainly, in terms of offensive rebounds, American dominated.
Right. You would think that Golden DK2 would probably be a little more disciplined just with the fouling. You would think that he would be because he's a big guy to have on the boards because he's a pretty good rebounder.
It wasn't even the fouling, though. It was just that they were dominating the boards. And
right. You got to get better positioning.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to the fundamentals in the post. And listen, those were
we know good. We can do it too.
Those were good. Yeah, Golden is a good rebounder. He gives great effort most of the time. I think it was a kind of a combination of things because let's remember, Alonzo Fowey did not play much in the first half, right? He picked up the 2 quick fouls, and I don't think we saw him for the rest of the first half.
No, he was kind of hiding in the dust a little bit.
Exactly. So we don't really have that many other big man options besides those 2, right? Because we already have the Illich twins who are both hurt. And then that leaves us kind of just with Dave Brown, who he's not as big as those other guys, but he's kind of more like a tweener. I'd say.
He's kind of a hybrid forward.
Yeah, he's kind of like a tweener more than anything. But really, if Alonzo's out, all we have is Golden. So, with the circumstances, Golden was doing his best, and obviously we ended up getting the W. But that's just something that we got to improve on next game. And obviously, I think we will because we've seen a lot of games where Golden has absolutely dominated the boards. He almost had a triple-double. And by the way, too, I want to shout this out again. Golden did have some nice offensive plays when it came to the passing. Once again, that is something that he can do well. That alley-oop to Alonzo was a really nice pass.
It really was. Yeah, and there was another pass he made, too, when he was kind of in the post, wasn't sure what he was going to do. Found a wide-open three-point shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, he can draw a lot of attention just by looking one way and then passing it the other way.
Well, he commands so much attention in there because he's so aggressive. The other big men, I can tell, just they love going at it with him, like especially the way that he plays where he's very aggressive. So he just naturally is going to command so much attention. And honestly, when you think about it, with the other 4 players we have who can all shoot and hit threes, it can work. It really can. It can be like a masterpiece.
Yeah. But like you said, I mean, this is do or die now. So
it is do or die.
We're going to have to take care of business tomorrow against Holy Cross. Hopefully we can pack the gym, though, and get a lot of fans there. Really use the home court advantage to our advantage.
I hope that it's a great crowd. Obviously, I think the team's been playing really hard, and I do think that they've been improving. I mean, we sat here in the middle of February, in the beginning of February, and we said, what realistically can the team do to save the season? And we're like, they just need to improve every game. From that point on,
They really have.
Yeah, they certainly have. And it just sucks because I do feel like we are partly injured. Like, could you imagine if we had the Illich twins? I mean, the one started last year. So not having that really kind of hurts us. But when it comes to what we have, I still think we can go on a run. And it starts Tuesday. It starts tomorrow.
And I'm not gonna try to look too far ahead.
You don't try and start, you don't talk about that, but it starts Tuesday.
Yeah.
You gotta focus on Tuesday.
Yeah. And it helps that we've been home recently too. So we've kind of gotten accustomed to the home crowd. But yeah, gotta take care of business against Holy Cross.
Certainly.
And then on the women's side, they have one more game on Wednesday. They host Colgate before their Patriot League tournament starts on Saturday. They took some tough losses this week. They were on the road against Holy Cross and American. So they got one more game, and hopefully they can get some momentum back before their Patriot League tournament begins. But I want to shift it to the lacrosse side of things, Jimmy. The men's team went up to Rutgers over the weekend. They took a tough loss by the score of 10-6. And like we've said, the common theme, I think, so far through these first 3 games now is the defense is the bedrock of the team. I think the question is, we know the offense can pretty much be existent most days, but can they be existent enough? And unfortunately, they just didn't chip in on Saturday in this 10-6 loss, but the defense again gave them a chance. It's a tough game.
They gave up 1 goal in the fourth quarter too. It was 9-3.
Yeah.
So we kind of locked down at the end.
The tough one for the defense was the third quarter. They gave up 5.
Yeah.
Giving up 3 in the first quarter, not bad. I mean, second quarter only 1. That's great. I mean, we're kind of in it the whole way, but getting down early in lacrosse is tough. It's a lot of momentum that has to go. Yeah, we have seen that. It's a lot of momentum in lacrosse. Once you get it, it's great because you can ride it forever. But if you don't have it, it's hard to stop. And I just didn't think we had it Saturday. But Rutgers is a tough team. They were coming in at number 14 in the rankings.
And we knew that this was going to be a tough game. Like, despite the fact that they had lost to a Patriot League opponent on the road, which was Army, we knew Army's in the rankings, we're in the rankings, and Rutgers was also ranked very highly at the beginning of the season, despite that loss. So we knew that we were dealing with a team that had a lot of talent. And I'm not really surprised that we lost this game just because, naturally a team like Rutgers is going to win games too. Like, that's just the way it is. And to start, when you think about it, we've now faced 3 Big Ten teams, and we went 2-1 in that stretch. I would say that's a win, right?
Right. And I think the poll kind of reflects that. We only dropped 1 spot to number 7.
We shouldn't have really dropped.
We've played 3 teams who are all ranked and all in the top 14 at the time that we played them. So we've been battle tested for sure.
Absolutely, we've been battle tested. You cannot say that we haven't at all. We've played 3 very good teams.
Yeah. And then coming up this week, it's kind of a role reversal. We play 2 teams that are not ranked. We go to Towson on Wednesday for a little Maryland showdown, and then we play Lafayette at home Saturday, which is the first Patriot League game. So that's obviously going to have a little more importance than the other games, I think, just because it's a conference game. But
certainly, you want to start off.
You would love to get 2 victories there.
Yeah, and I agree with that. You got to the Towson game on Wednesday as a non-conference game. We want to win that just because we want to start off on the right path. Because I feel like if we can close out the non-conference play, but I know we play Duke in a couple more weeks, but for the most part, conference play is going to be like ramping up, and that's going to be the primary focus of our team. But if we can kind of end on a good note there and go 3-1, that would be a good stretch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you would love to get victories, especially against teams that you're supposed to beat.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to give those games away, and then you go into a game like Duke coming up where they just come off a huge week, and now they're in the top 10, and that's going to be a tough task, especially on the road.
Yeah, and also for that Duke game that's going to be on the road, they were really firing it up against Penn this weekend. So, I mean, they're a team that can score, and they're a team that can play very well. So we will have our hands full when that time does come. But before that, we have 2 games which we need to focus on. And the first is this Wednesday against Towson. Now, in years past, Towson has been unranked and has beat us.
They actually beat us last year at Ridley.
So
you definitely think that's in the back of Loyola's minds.
Certainly. And like I said before, the unranked to ranked difference in lacrosse isn't always as big as it may seem in like other sports. At least that's something that I've picked on it since we've been covering it. I just feel like there just isn't that big of a gap.
No,
Anybody can beat
especially
anybody.
if the unranked team's playing a ranked team and the unranked team gets off to a great start. I mean, I'll just use the Maryland Loyola example. We get off to that great start. We go up 5-3 or whatever, and then they kind of come back a little bit. But once you get a little run of goals, I mean, it's tough to stop.
Absolutely. And it's kind of nice that we don't really have to travel that far because it definitely seems like we play our best games here in Maryland, right? So having two games, I know Towson isn't a home game, but it's a close game, so we don't really have to travel like you do when you're driving to Piscataway to go play Rutgers. It's not as
Right.
much as
A 10-minute drive is a
yeah,
lot better to have than a
3 hour
3-hour
adventure to
drive. You would
Piscataway.
know.
Yeah. So yeah, I would know. Yeah, I'm getting messages from my brother about the win. Like, yeah, whatever, dude. Congrats on your win, dude. Whatever. Whatever. We'll see him in the playoffs, hopefully. But we still have a lot of season left. And it starts with the Towson game on Wednesday, and it starts with conference play starting up on Saturday as well. I think if you can go into those into that game or into that stretch with 2 wins there, be at 4-1, you would not ask for a much better setup than that.
Oh, for sure. And especially because I think we're the favorite to win the Patriot League this year. I think just getting so many wins early on
It's
is
gonna be tough
huge.
though because there are some good teams. Like
Right. You can't ignore Lafayette either because Lafayette is not really viewed as a great Patriot League team, but they can beat anyone. I mean, all these teams are competitive. I mean, you go back to what you said about the ranked and unranked thing. That's going to be a ranked team against a non-ranked team on Saturday. So
yeah,
it's gonna be huge.
we have 2 games, and here's another side to that. We're talking about this Duke game that's in a little bit in the distance. We as a team better make sure that we don't get kind of like looking ahead too much to this Duke game because we're playing 2 unranked opponents. Like we need to still focus and play our best game because anything can happen. Like like we said last year, an unranked Towson team came to Ridley and beat us.
Yeah, you got to take care of these little games first before the big ones. You got to focus there first. I mean, we talked about that with the Loyola Holy Cross game tomorrow in basketball. It's the same kind of situation, except these are regular season games. It's not a postseason game, but you got to focus on what's in front of you, not what's down the line in the future. But I will say, though, I brought up how we were only dropped one spot from 6 to 7. I think strength of schedule in lacrosse is huge because we've seen Loyola go from not being ranked to number 11, and then we beat Johns Hopkins, who was a top 6 team, and now we went from 11 to 6. So I think who you play matters a lot too. We saw it with Duke. I mean, I know we've mentioned that game coming up in a week and a half or so, but they were number 14 going into last week, and now they're at number 6. And we saw Maryland beat Princeton over the weekend. Maryland was number 9. Now they go to 4. They jump Princeton. Princeton goes from 3 to 5. So there's a lot of movement going on in the top 10. But on the women's side, they have 2 games this week as well, Jimmy. They host Penn on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and then they go to Penn State on Saturday at 12 o'clock. And they went up one spot from 9 to 8. So they're at number 8.
Yeah, they're 2-0. They've only played 2 games, but good to see that they're in the top 10. It's where they should be with the wins that they've had and the quality of season that they've put up in past years. We know that it's a pretty legit program. Obviously, we had that little appearance in the tournament last year, and we're a respected team. So, despite only playing 2 games, I think that's the appropriate spot.
Yeah, I think so. I think the poll is having them at a good spot. And an interesting scheduling thing. I know
because they haven't played a lot of games.
Right.
There's not much to go up.
Right. And we've talked about how Loyola has 2 games this week, which is, I guess, not uncommon, but there's not many midweek games. Interestingly, on the women's side, Jimmy, they have a game every single Wednesday and every single Saturday between now and then the week of April 1st to the 8th. They play Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. It's unbelievable.
That's going to be tough, though.
They don't have many stretches where they have a week off and it's like Saturday to Saturday. They have a lot of Wednesday games.
And I'm assuming that's because of a conference play, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a stretch coming up here mid to end March where they go 5 straight games against the Patriot League. And then there's a few non-conference in there, but yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna
busy schedule.
Yeah, they're gonna be busy. They're gonna have their work cut out for them. The only thing you worry about with that is health, just because there's so many games in such a short period of time. So we just hope that all the athletes stay healthy and everybody on our team, can be out there. Because I feel like when our team is out there, we have a very good chance of winning based on what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, especially we have a lot of depth, and we've had a lot of ladies from last year's team come back.
Mhm.
So that definitely helps. I think it's going to bode well for them for now and down the stretch. So, yeah, good things for the men's and women's lacrosse team so far. I'm very pleased with how their seasons are going so far. Jimmy, we're going to switch the topic here. We're going to go to the baseball side of things. And I think by far the one thing that has taken the MLB by storm, and we've talked about this off the air, but I think it's time to address on there, is the pitch clock. It's brand new this year. It's basically MLB's version of a play clock or a shot clock, and it's causing a lot of controversy, excuse me, and backlash. But we've both talked about it. I'll give you the mic first. I know that you like it, but I guess if you want to elaborate more on why you like it.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of the pitch clock. The way I look at it is the first guy who earned his team a strike was Manny Machado. Manny Machado never hustles down to first, right? And obviously, like I'm big on like giving full effort for your team, just because these guys are getting paid so much money, and baseball is by far the least physically grueling sport on your body. Like obviously, if you're the arm for the pitcher is one thing, but like in terms of like the physical beating that you take, nowhere close to like hockey or football. So for guys to like not hustle annoys me, and it always has. And I feel like this is just another kind of thing for that, where it's like you're only going to be hurting your team if you don't follow the rules. And a guy like that is just a guy who's just going to put a negative impact on his team. So I feel like it's going to force everybody to kind of adjust, because you don't want to be hurting your own team. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is the results are already flying through, and it's clear that this was the right move, because the games have went from over 3 hours to now being done in 2.5. I can tell you right now, there is not a single other sport that gets done in 2.5 hours.
Yeah, besides maybe the NBA and the NHL, which is usually around there.
I they're getting these games done in under 2.5 hours.
But it's great because
that the first one was 2 hours and like 29 minutes. That's perfect.
Well, you're right.
Can you imagine if the home team doesn't bat in the last inning? It's going to be even shorter.
Right. And I think the big thing here is that it's not only the pitcher's job to speed it up, it's also the hitter's job. I mean, we saw right away with Manny Machado, he's not ready in time to bat. And what do? They give him a strike.
Yeah. And I was worried that, like, you know how sometimes in basketball, when a star player maybe travels, it doesn't get called. I thought that was going to happen in baseball, but I am glad to see right away that the umpires are like, nope, we're not going to do that. Just because you're Manny Machado, that was the first guy, that kind of set the tempo. And Machado, after the game's like, well, I guess I'm going to be starting in a lot of 0-1 counts. If I was a Padres fan, I'd be like, no, dude, how about you just get it together, step into the box, stop taking so much time, and just hit the ball. And honestly, it's going to force everybody to kind of change their approach, because, you know, teams aren't going to have time to steal signs. Teams aren't going to have time to think more about their pitches and change things. And also, the hitter isn't going to have time to step out around the box. Everybody has to adjust. And that's why, because it's equal, it's fair, I'm okay with it. The players just simply need to adjust. And honestly, I think it's going to better the game in the long run. So I don't really see any problem with it. The only issue I had was I hated that spring training game ended in the 9th inning on that.
I was going to bring that up.
However, that guy did not follow the rules. You're supposed to be ready with 8 seconds to go. He was not ready with 8 seconds to go. By the time he looked at the pitcher, there were 5 seconds on the clock. So you know what? If that's the rule, I guarantee that guy will never do it again. I don't even remember who it was, but I'm pretty sure it was just some minor league.
Right. It was the Red Sox and Braves. That was the two teams that were playing. And I think the Braves batter was up, and I think they were bases loaded with 2 outs. And then he got called out on, I think, a third strike because he wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So I think
it was a full count too.
Right. So I think that part of it kind of feels a little unnatural for a game to end like that. And that's kind of a weird thing that we might have to get used to, honestly, just because of the nature of the pitch clock. But I just love how, like you said earlier, these games are going from being 3.5 hours long to some games in the first few days of spring training being done in 2.5 hours, maybe even less. I love it too, because let's just say you're sitting at home, you're watching the Yankees for your sake, the Phillies for my sake. I don't know. You're sitting at home. The first pitch comes, and then
if you want a good laugh.
you're watching at home, you're sitting on your couch on the Tuesday night or whatever, and you see the first pitch happen, and I don't know, maybe you get a text notification on your phone, whatever. It causes you to not look at your phone or get distracted or get up and get a glass of water or whatever. You can just stay on your couch because you know the game's going to be faster now. It's not like one pitch is thrown, you're like, oh, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. You're going to constantly be engaged. So it's going to be good.
Jeff, I have some bad news concerning the Philadelphia Eagles champion. Carson Wentz
I
has
did
been
just see
released
this.
from the Commanders.
Yeah.
I just wanted to. Do you have a quick reaction you would like to give to that? I'll start off.
It's crazy.
It is crazy where Carson Wentz has gone the last couple of years. He didn't play that bad in Indianapolis. Like he threw for 27 touchdowns and 7 picks. There's way worse ratios. That's almost a 4-to-1 ratio. We've seen way worse ratios. I can tell you Derek Carr's quarterback or a touchdown interception ratio is much worse than that. Dak as well this year. But Carson, with the injury, he kind of was the scapegoat. His number's not guaranteed, and he's just not that player anymore. There's no reason for them to keep him. But boy, that has been a complete fall off. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like if he's not with Frank Reich, it's just not right.
Yeah. The reason I said crazy is just because you go from being drafted number 2 and then you
being the franchise,
be an integral part of a Super Bowl winning team. I know he didn't play in the playoffs to his injury, but he was the catalyst for getting that 1 seed for the most part. And just to see him get traded, have that beef with Doug Peterson, and he does pretty well, like you said, in Indy. He didn't do too bad.
He was the scapegoat because he played so horrible in that last game.
Right. 20
into that, he was okay.
Right. After the 2017 year where he was the runner-up to MVP, he had back-to-back years that were okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he gets traded after the 2020 season when the Eagles only won 4 games. He goes to Indianapolis, reunites with Frank Reich, who was formerly the OC in Philly. That's a pretty decent year. I know they lost to Jacksonville. That was obviously a bad look. And then he goes to Washington and he plays for a little bit, and then he gets injured. Heinicke comes in, and then he gets his job back later in the year, but they were really out of playoff contention by that point. It just sucks because I feel like a lot of the good that he's done in his career, especially earlier on in his career, has been just overshadowed by just the awful interceptions, bad injury history. It's just crazy to see him go from being an upper echelon quarterback to now just trying to find a home.
You know, it's interesting. He definitely needs to go someplace where he can kind of be rehabilitated. I mean, kind of like Baker Mayfield. Go to a place with a good offensive coach, sit behind him, trying to develop more of your skills, see if you can become like a long-term backup option or maybe like a veteran QB option for another team. That would be ideal. But when you think about this too, one of the things I noticed about Carson Wentz, he feels like it's like he's the scapegoat everywhere that he goes. He must just not be very liked. Like there's a chance that every teammate that he plays with might actually hate him because I have truly never seen a player just get destroyed every single stop. Like he leaves the Eagles 2020. He gets all the blame. I mean, is it all on him? Not really. They had no receivers out there. The O-line was not great. And he had a good season the year before and was almost an MVP candidate not that long before that.
Yeah, so going off what you said, maybe he's not liked. There was a report during the 2020 season that was written by a Philadelphia writer. And some of the words and adjectives he was using were selfish and egotistical. And I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I mean, that could just be a sign that maybe wherever he is or wherever he goes, maybe trouble just indirectly comes his way. And there were reports that he would actually change plays as well. And this reminded me of our conversation on Friday when we were talking about that Athletic article that came out about Russell Wilson. And I don't know, it just reminded me about how maybe the coaching staff could think one thing, but he thinks another thing. And then he tries to override what he thinks into the play calling.
Well, you know what else I just got reminded of? And I completely forgot about this. But Eddie Stank, who comes on all the time, obviously he's an Eagles fan, just like you, Jeff. And I don't know if you remember this too, but when the Eagles won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, there's a video of Carson Wentz saying, "This is me next year. This is me next year." Like, it seems like he was kind of just always about himself. And I feel like that might have rubbed people the wrong way.
I've never seen that. I've never heard of that, actually.
Yeah, it's out there. Video.
Okay.
It's not a great look, but that kind of just explains the kind of guy he is. I mean, we've never seen Russ do something like that. Although we have heard him say, or we have heard reports that he says it's Russell Wilson time on the sideline. So kind of the same thing. Both disasters, but The difference is one is under contract for a while and won't be going anywhere, and the other guy does not have a job.
Yeah, and I know that we're a little short on time here. We're gonna go to break in a minute or so, but yeah, I just don't know where he goes from here.
Backup option should try and find a place where he can just rehabilitate.
Maybe he gets lucky, something goes his way, and he finds himself starting next year.
They want to be honest with you. He should look for a good offensive coach. That should be his predominantly kind of view. Honestly, here's an option that I don't know if he really fits this offense, but maybe just as a veteran in the room for this team. What about the 49ers? Like Kyle Shanahan's great with quarterbacks. I don't know if that really fits Wentz's game that well, but I feel like he can make those easy kind of passes.
I agree.
And obviously they have two quarterbacks who are going to be on their second years, really kind of third for Trey Lance, but really second years playing. And so they're both very, very, very young. And we've already seen the quarterback issues that they've had. They could get Wentz for probably a really cheap price. And
they could.
He could rehabilitate his career. I mean, we've seen other guys find a way. We've seen Geno now find a way. It can be done, right? Like there's a chance, but
yeah,
it's just
their QB room's a little crowded right now, but I don't think it'll be crowded going into next year just because they might trade Garoppolo.
No, Garoppolo's a free agent.
Oh yeah,
so
that's my mistake.
Yeah, so he's gone. So it's literally just Lance and Purdy.
Maybe it could be a place to be.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but.
Welcome back to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After This with Jeffrey Bazzi and Jimmy Cody. And we've had a lot going on the show today. We were talking about the breaking news out of Washington that the Commanders released quarterback Carson Wentz. And Jimmy, I just saw something where this move creates, or actually I should say it saves $26.176 million on the Commander's salary cap. So I guess that's another interesting point to note. But I was going to just bring up one more point about the pitch clock, which we were talking about earlier before we had this breaking news that came out of nowhere. I just like how it's a two-way street because it's not like it's just affecting the pitcher. It's also affecting the batter and vice versa. If you're the batter, it's not like you have to hold up your end of the job. The pitcher also has to hold up their end of the job. So I kind of like how both players have to be ready at the same time because I saw a video from one of the games over the weekend. I forget which two teams were playing, but I saw the pitcher kind of go into his windup and the batter was kind of just standing there. And then all of a sudden he had a quick reaction and he puts his bat behind his shoulders. So he unfortunately was called for a strike. So I just like how it's kind of on both of them to be ready. And I think that's ultimately going to speed up most of these games.
Completely agree. It's on both guys. Everybody's got to be set. So that's what makes it equal and fair, as I said before. And I think that's the best part about it. Everybody's under the same rules.
And I think the other thing, too, is a lot of these MLB teams, they've had earlier start times to their games. It's not like they're starting these games at 7:05, 7:10, whatever. We've seen 6:35, 6:40, 6:45.
The Thursday day games, too, now. That's like a big thing recently. In the last couple of years, they've been doing that a lot. The Thursday day games.
Yeah. I know the Phillies Thursday day games are usually at 1:05, but the thing with the Phillies this year, I'm not sure if the Yankees have done this at all recently, but their night games during the week are now starting at 6:40. They're moving it up by 25 minutes. And so you take that with the pitch clock. I mean, that could trim off almost an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, the Yankees really haven't started that many games earlier, but a lot of our opponents, like the Rays, they've been starting those games kind of earlier. So like we have been accustomed to that. But in a city like New York, obviously you can still start at 7:00 because people are still going to come in. And plus, it takes a while to get places in the city. So
especially like a city such as New York and Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's a little different when it's St. Petersburg and there's 5 people showing up to watch the Rays and the Tigers play on a Wednesday. But, in New York and the Bronx, it's a bigger deal. I mean, at the same time, though, I feel like everything that we start in baseball, we hate right away because it's not traditional. And
it's America's national pastime.
Yeah. But I feel like we get very sensitive about that. And we're like, don't switch baseball. Don't switch baseball. But this actually is going to fix the game. What playoff game in like other sports is going to be as quick as this? When we see how much basketball drags out at the end.
Especially with the fouling and the timeouts and overtime if it happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's exciting.
Especially with hockey, too, with the endless overtimes. Yeah. I think that's the main thing, too, because baseball, you get, one pitch. Let me wait 30 seconds to the next one. Now it's out the window.
That's out the window because the guy's got to be ready and the umpire's going to call a strike. And listen, I like it all around. I really don't see a negative about it. And also, too, you know what else I like? And I noticed in the spring training, I'm not attributing this to the bigger bases. I actually think it's a little bit more of the clock. But now these runners on base have a little bit more of a opportunity to steal, just because I mean the bases are bigger, and the pitcher can't be as focused on the runner because they got to pitch.
Right. It's a whole nother element to it because once they get the ball back from the catcher, they're thinking, oh, there's a mental clock going on in my head, not to mention a literal physical clock somewhere in the stadium. So they got to focus on getting the pitch delivered in time. And then they got to worry about the guy in first or second, whoever.
Exactly. So it's like I feel like that's going to help the game in an offensive sense, just because the runners are going to become a way bigger part of the game. It's almost like, we had guys who could steal, right? There's some guys in the game who are known for their speed, like Billy Hamilton over the years, been known strictly for his speed. We got guys like, D Gordon, like they make their careers off of that. But now I feel like even if you're like a little bit less of a speed guy, you're still going to have a chance to steal bases now because of the changes that have been made.
Oh, no doubt.
And it's only going to open up the game more.
Right. And the other thing I'll mention just before we switch topics is we were talking about the games being shorter with night games starting early, and the games might be done at like the 9 o'clock hour instead of the 10 o'clock hour. Some of the day games, just because of the TV contracts, are now on Peacock. And actually this year there's a few on NBC and they start at 11:30 in the morning. The only reason I know this is because I was looking at the schedule today and I was kind of curious what the few Sunday night baseball games were, at least in April and May. And there's some good ones in there, but some of these games are like 11:35 first pitches, and then the Peacock ones are at 12:05. So some of these games might be on like 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah. Well, listen, I could sit here and talk about the Peacock stuff all day. It's a good concept. Like I like starting the day off with baseball. I wish they put it on real NBC instead, just because Peacock.
So I think they are doing that.
Are they going to do it every week though?
I think they might flip flop, or there might be some weeks where it's on both.
I'll say this. I'm sure when the Yankees, Phillies, Mets, Red Sox, Dodgers play, it will be on NBC. And when it's the Tigers and the Rays, it will be on Peacock.
Right. I think I saw
like that's probably because that's how ESPN Sunday night. That's the biggest complaint, right?
Right.
Is that we always see the same big market teams.
Yeah. And there was one game, I think it was someone playing the Braves in April or whatever, and it was on NBC. And then there was another Sunday where it was a Peacock game and the home team was the Guardians. And the Guardians are good, but they're also not as popular and marketable as the Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox and the Phillies and the Dodgers.
Yeah, exactly.
Etc.
Yeah.
So
we know who the big dogs are, and we know who the small dogs are when it comes to baseball. I will say too, one of the things I'm more interested to see is how this affects kind of like pitching throughout the season. Like, are pitcher numbers going to be better because the guys are working faster? I know that benefits some guys, but then there's some other guys that work better slower. And that was kind of like I think about a guy like Nestor Cortez, right? His whole thing was messing up the timing of the batter, right? How's that going to affect a guy like him? It's just there's a lot of circumstances that are going to change within baseball. And I think we're going to see a season that's really unlike anything we've ever seen before, just because of the new rule with the time.
Yeah. It feels like, I don't know, gimmicky, I guess, to some people that the pitch clock's there, but I love it. I think it's honestly for the better.
No problem with it.
I mean, it might take some of these players a little time to get used to it, but I don't know. I hope these slower pitchers obviously will have to pick it up.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't be giving away balls to the hitter, and then vice versa. As a hitter, you don't want to give away a strike because then it just gives the pitcher more freedom to throw maybe their off-speed stuff, which can be nasty.
You're only hurting yourself and your team.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll definitely have to see how that goes early on in the season, but we're going to shift our focus to the NBA side of things. A lot of stuff going on this weekend in the NBA world, Jimmy. And let's just start with last night. Damian Lillard dropping 71 points in the Trailblazers win over the Rockets, 131 to 114. And believe it or not, Jimmy, this is actually the second 71-point game of the season. Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers had one earlier in the season. And it's obviously just an amazing feat, first and foremost, right off the bat. And it's really hard to drop 71 in a game, let alone it's hard to drop 30 or 40. And sometimes I think we take it for granted that some of these guys average like 30 a game. Like we've seen Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, and others average in the 30s this year. But to have 71 in a game, and I think Damian Lillard also had a career high of 13 threes in this game. And yeah, it's just an amazing accomplishment.
An NBA record.
Yeah. And I actually haven't seen too many of the highlights from this game, so I'll have to rewatch it probably later. But I just heard that some of the shots he was hitting were just unbelievable.
Yeah, they're very deep. And one of the things that I was most amazed by is number one, he only played 39 minutes. So that's crazy, especially when you consider how much Dame's usage is in general for the Blazers. It's always been really high. He's always been a guy who's played a lot of minutes for them. So I'm kind of surprised in a game where he was going off that he didn't get a little bit more. But honestly, it really wasn't that necessary because the win was never really in doubt for them near the end. The second thing is he only had 2 turnovers. He was so effective with the ball. And in general, it's just nice to see for a guy like Damian Lillard because he prides himself on like being the franchise of Portland, like, being the star player there right now and like sticking with the team, not leaving, not want to go chase a rings on other teams. There's so many guys who want to just ring chase in today's league. And he's the one guy I would say that's pretty upfront. Like, I do not want to be associated with that. I want to win my own ring. Maybe the other guy would say he ended up doing it, but Giannis, right? I mean, he kind of stayed in the same place and got it, and it was really awesome. So I'm happy for Damian Lillard and that, right? Just because it's cool to see.
Yeah, he's definitely different compared to the other superstars because he wants to stay in Portland. He's kind of devoted himself to being in Portland for now and maybe the future too. He signed that deal, so looks like he's not going to go anywhere anytime soon unless something happens. But he loves Portland. I think that's very clear. And I just can't believe that it's happened twice this year. I feel like these kind of games are so rare. I mean, we saw Kobe drop 81 in the mid 2000s, and I think that still holds as the second highest scoring game ever. I mean, you could quote me on that, but that's what a friend told me. So to drop 71, though, I mean, that's ridiculous. And I think it kind of shows where the game's going now. I mean, you see these point guards, especially, and these guards just cross half court, and they're pulling up from the logos that are on that side of the court, and they're pulling up from 30, 40 feet. I mean, we've never seen this before. I mean, 10 years ago, you see players try to get the ball inside and get easy buckets in the paint, but now it's people cross half court, get one screen, the shot's going up.
Yeah, and I would like to forward this into another conversation about how like the Blazers needed this game because the West is so tight, particularly like where they're at. They're 29 and 31. The Lakers are a game behind them or half game behind them at 21 and 32, or I'm sorry, 29 and 32. And neither of those teams is in the play-in, right? So those are two star-studded teams. They're still catching New Orleans in 10th, Minnesota in 9th, Utah in 8th, and even the Warriors are in the play-in right now in 7th. And by the way, the Warriors only have 31 wins. So there's only 2.5 games separating or 2 games separating the Lakers and the Warriors. It is very tight. The difference between being in the play-in to being out of the play-in to being out of the playoffs completely. It's so tight over there.
And it's funny because we talk about Damian Lillard dropping 71. It completely overshadowed the game itself because the Rockets actually, they were down most of the game. The Trailblazers were kind of in cruise control. And then the Rockets had a pretty decent run in the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, but Damian Lillard was just too much to handle. But you're right. This is a huge game for the Blazers because they're in that play-in category where they could get in the play-in and they could, if they get hot, maybe get in the top 6, but that's kind of a daunting task at this point just because of where we are in the season. But yeah, they really needed this game. But you brought up the Lakers, Jimmy. They had a huge come from behind win in Dallas yesterday. They took down the Mavs 111-108. And ever since they made the trades, Jimmy, they haven't lost. I know it's only 3 games, but they beat New Orleans before the break. They came out of the break. They beat Golden State pretty easily. And then they come back in Dallas and beat the Mavs with Kyrie and Luka. So I don't know, Jimmy. Do you think the Lakers are for real? Like, if they could get in the playoffs, do you realistically think they could win a first round series?
Well, here's the thing. The credit.
I know it might be a stretch, but maybe what if?
I mean, I think they're a team that can play with anybody just because of who they have. They have LeBron James, number 1. They also have number 2, Anthony Davis. It's nice to see him actually do something. He had 30 points last night. And he was really kind of the guy that I felt like led that comeback. He's been playing a lot better recently too. But the whole concern with him is just like, is he going to stay on the court? Because I feel like every time he starts to play good, he then gets hurt. And really, since that championship in 2020 in the bubble, we really haven't seen the best of AD, and we haven't seen him play with LeBron very much at all. And I feel like that's kind of been like the number 1 reason for the downfall of the Lakers. It's just Anthony Davis just not being available. But if he's out there and he does what he does last night, then they're gonna have a chance in every game.
Yeah, and
That's a great comeback too. Down 27.
Oh, for sure. And you bring up LeBron and AD. I mean, they were a deadly duo in the 2019-20 season where they got off to a great start. They were the 1 seed. Then COVID happens. They go in the bubble and they still find a way to win the title. And then the last few years, they've kind of been off the court at the same time or at different times. And they've kind of had a hard time redeveloping the chemistry. But I mean, we've seen Anthony Davis this year when he's in the court. He's just a force to be reckoned with. And ever since he came back from the injury, he's been lights out. And I think the other difference too with the Lakers now is besides LeBron and AD, the drop off to the third best player, I guess you could say, it's not as big as it was pre-trade deadline. And
they have D'Lo now.
They were missing D'Lo yesterday, which is crazy, and they still found a way. D'Lo's
a couple games.
Probably the third best player. Yes, that is correct. But it's not like you're going to Austin Reeves as your third option. No shade to Austin Reeves, but he's a fine player. But now you have D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, and Dennis Schroeder. Rui Hachimura, I should mention him. He's probably the third or fourth best player in the Lakers.
Probably fourth.
You just have more options.
You know what it is? D'Lo's an all-star. Anthony Davis is an all-star. LeBron James, he's the leading scorer in the history of the NBA. Like, these are good players that they have now. The roster of 4 weeks ago, is not the roster of now at all.
Oh, no. I mean, Rob Pelinka, he said, if I was going to make moves, we were going to transform the team in a way that would only make it better. And I think it's clearly shown that they've made the team better through the 3 games so far.
They went younger, they went more athletic, and they went with some shooting, too. That was kind of a good thing to see with the addition of D'Lo, just because look at what they were dealing with at point guard. Like, Russ has just not been the shooter that he could have been earlier in his career, and his offensive shooting just in general is kind of like went down. But D'Lo is just a little bit more crafty and just I think fits a little bit better too with LeBron and Anthony Davis. Just in general, like the fit as a whole is just a better. And Rui Hachimura was kind of like stuck on the Wizards. Like, I never really understood what their plan was for him because he was a very high lottery pick coming out of Gonzaga. He looked like somebody who was very athletic, had potential on the defensive and rebounding end, and then had some offensive skills that he could put to use. Well, now on the Lakers, I feel like we've seen him kind of come out of his shell and play his best.
They're kind of just letting him do what he's good at.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about that another day. I think more of that too is with the Wizards and kind of how they were going at it too.
It's coaching too.
But yeah, no, we've definitely seen him be more of himself on the Lakers. But I wanted to ask you, Jimmy, I know we're kind of short on time here, but over the weekend, we had the Celtics-Sixers game. The Celtics won a thriller, 110-107. But I think something that's being talked about a lot is how Joel Embiid, he got his 3/4 court shot off just a tad too late, and the shot went in. So that's why people were talking about it. And the same thing happened last night in the Clippers-Nuggets game. The Nuggets tie the game. The Clippers inbound it. They go to Paul George. Paul George makes the same shot, a 3/4 court shot, basically. It goes in, but it doesn't count. And then for both the Sixers and the Clippers, the teams ended up losing the game. The Sixers lost by 3. And then in the LA-Denver game last night, Denver ends up winning 134-124 in overtime. They ran away with it in overtime. But I don't know. What's your reaction? That's probably one of the weirdest, craziest, I don't know, things to happen back-to-back nights.
Yeah, I mean, the Embiid shot on Saturday was insane. I mean, watching that, the fact that it even went in is amazing in itself because it was such a long shot. But it just sucks because it was so close to being a shot that could have actually counted for the Sixers. He didn't get it off in time. And the same thing can be said for the Paul George shot. Amazing that it took place, but just did not count. And that's the unfortunate part. But as for the coolness of it, yeah, it's pretty cool that it happened back-to-back days.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we have a minute or two left, but I wanted to touch on 2 things that we wanted to touch on here in the show. And that's the Bears. They have the #1 pick in the draft coming up in April. They're leaning towards trading down for that pick. And I'll just ask you off the bat, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you agree with them trying to go in that direction? Because yeah, I kind of agree with it.
I do. I think the team that usually moves down is usually a team that kind of benefits, especially if you can get a good haul. It just feels like there's no threat of the Bears actually taking the quarterback. So nobody ever actually offered them anything too legit. It was just if they wanted to jump the Texans. Now, the one team I feel like I could see doing that is the Colts, just because they have talked very highly of Bryce Young. So maybe they would be willing to give up a lot. But if you look over the past couple of years, teams who have traded up for quarterbacks, Washington for Robert Griffin III, that did not work out. the Wentz Eagles move up. Unfortunately, I guess you could say that did not work out. Jared Goff to the Rams. Did it work out? I don't know. Not really. They made it to a Super Bowl, but they got rid of him. So, eh. And then the Jets traded up for Sam Darnold recently, too. So if you look at those are all like the recent examples that I give you for a quarterback, right? That would be the presumed reason that you are trading up in this draft, right? For the quarterback.
And I don't know if you said Mitch Trubisky.
Oh, Mitch Trubisky is another one, too. Gosh, how could I forget about that? Mitch Trubisky. And then Trey Lance.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
the verdict is still
you
out
just
on,
ripped off what, 5 to 6
the verdict
quarterbacks?
is out on Trey Lance still. I'm not going to rush to any judgment just because I do like his coach a lot, and I think that might be one of the better situations he could be in. We don't even know if he's going to be the starter next year. So if that happens again, there might be a big discussion on is moving up for a quarterback really that worth it? I'm at the team now, not with those moves that I've been seeing.
Yeah, I think it's a good move that the Bears want to do this because they have a QB that they're trying to build around that they're pretty satisfied with. And they did say they would have to be blown away by one of the QB prospects if they were going to ever even consider drafting him. So I think it's good that they're going to, I guess, most likely trade back because they can get someone else in a different position that they need. I mean, they definitely need to fill up the O-line. Not sure if there's any good O-linemen in the top half of the draft, but maybe there's other positions that they could fill there.
The Bears are just so behind in so many areas that they kind of need a lot of picks. Like if I'm the Bears, I'm looking for at least 2 firsts in return and 2 seconds, or maybe a second and a third. I'm looking for a decent haul, especially just because the Texans are probably going to take a quarterback at 2. So a team that would be reaching out to you is looking to move above the Texans. And you got to play the card of, hey, the Texans are going to draft a quarterback here. You want to jump up here. I mean, maybe the Texans themselves will jump up because there's a rumor that they're interested, but I don't really see the point in that. I guess they can just flip the 1 and 2 picks. That's possible, right?
I mean, they could.
Yeah. And then, hear me out. They could do that, and then they could probably get a lot for the second pick because that essentially becomes like the draft starts here because we knew the Texans were always going to go for a quarterback anyway.
Yeah. And I feel like with the draft, the first few picks that go along, I mean, you can expect certain people to go certain places, but once it gets to that little gray area where you don't really know, I mean, that's where the fireworks start.
That's where the fireworks start. And honestly, that's where a lot of the great players are drafted. I mean, think about like some of the guys who were like, intriguing prospects that teams ended up taking a chance on a little bit later and it ended up working out. I mean, I was thinking about like the Micah Parsons, like, he was this good, really athletic linebacker and he had a lot of talent. But I mean, just in general, really, the Cowboys have been nailing their drafts recently. When you think about it, with Parsons, Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, I mean, they really do have a pretty good job of drafting in the first round. So
they know how to find studs.
And they're not a team that's always drafting high. The point is, in the NFL, I think it's more so about your scouting and trusting what you do more so than the guys. I always believe that. Like, not really where the order is. It's about finding the right players because there's so many good players that can be found all over.
Right. And then one very last thing before we close the show, you brought up how Jeff Bezos is now unable / not allowed to buy the Commanders. So what's your thoughts there? I guess maybe quick little context too.
Yeah. So Dan Snyder, the owner of the Washington Commanders, is selling the team, the Commanders. And Jeff Bezos is interested. Jeff Bezos obviously can buy the team. Like, nobody's going to be able to outbid Jeff Bezos if he wants the team. That's just the truth. But Dan Snyder does not want to sell the team to Jeff Bezos because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And he's concerned, or he doesn't like that they put so much negative press about Dan Snyder. But Dan Snyder kind of does it to himself. So I'm not really sure what he's that mad about. But that's really the reason for it. However, I was doing some reading, and it's possible he could just be driving up the price from Bezos.
Yeah.
Could just be a marketing, a negotiating tactic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the issue with that. And if the other NFL owners are probably not too happy about that, just because they know Jeff Bezos is probably going to throw a lot of money at the team and will only make the other teams more expensive in value. So it's interesting to see how this will go. I just can't see Snyder really just holding on to the team for no reason. Like, he's going to be getting billions of dollars out of this. Like, he's better off just selling.
Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as that story progresses and develops. But Thank you, as always, for listening. We will be back on Friday for our last show before spring break. But have a great rest of the week, and we will see you on Friday.